Put the place up. Put my face up.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Chamber Live. Miguel Lloyd, your host. And today we're going to talk to a good friend of mine. Omar Ali and I have been friends for a while since I moved here to Atlanta. He's one of the people I respect most, him and his family in business. And so we're going to talk about servant leadership through business. Omar, what's up, brother?
Good to have you again, brother.
Good to have you, man. Always good to see you. One of the most calming spirits I have in my life. I ain't gonna front. I know when I call, pick up the phone, I know, first of all, whatever you're going through, what's going on? Let's talk.
Okay.
That's that's what we know. But you know, you always got a lot going on, a lot of positive things going on. But I really want this audience to understand what you and your family are doing in the market. Let's kind of start there. Let's talk about your upbringing in Griffin.
Look, I tell everyone that I'm a country boy. You know, my father raised me to be extremely humble.
Mm-hmm.
It's something in Griffin, man. I tell you, Griffin has a lot of Black entrepreneurs that come out of Griffin, but very family oriented. My father taught me to start my own business. You know, I tell the story all the time to where he didn't allow me to be a doctor. He didn't allow me to be an attorney. He wouldn't let me play sports or anything like that on a professional level. He just said that you can own the sports team, you can own the hospital, you can own the law firm. That's the way that I was raised, just traditional, great upbringings.
Yeah.
So,
From the time I met your father, Yusef, and we had a conversation, he's like a griot. I don't use that term lightly. It is so funny anytime we see him in a room, you always give him that look, and he'll look, he's all right, I'm gonna be brief. And I'm sitting back like, it's a joke, but sometimes you just need to listen to what he has to say. One of the first conversations we had, you talked about your family and the 300-year plan, and I had to sit back and listen. Tell us about that 300-year plan that you and your family.
I remember when Dad first introduced the concept of the 300-year plan, and it blew my mind. I was like, this is what we need to do. Everyone talks about legacy, but we think about legacy only immediate with our kids, but legacy should extend well beyond that. And so when he came up with 300 years, what's going to happen with my kids, their kids, and their kids, you know? I wouldn't be in a position I am today to where I grew my steel company to 70 million, and now I've jumped into the real estate industry if I didn't have that head start from my father.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that, coming right out of school, didn't have any money, go immediately into his office and tell him that I have this particular idea, no overhead. My father had an accountant utilizing his accountant, and you just utilizing his resources. That's the head start that we need. So for anyone who says that they made it on their own, that's not true. You know, we should be proud to have access to that resource that we have in our family, you know?
Yeah.
And so that is what the 300-year plan is about, you know, having that resource many years to come. I tell this story also to where I remember when one of my company was failing, and you have a pool of money sitting over here, but you can't get access to that pool of money. Why can't you get access to that pool of money? That is for your kids' kids and your kids' kids. Figure it out another way, you know? And it's very humbling to be able to approach it that particular way. But my kids are going to be okay. Their kids are going to be okay. And when they come up with the next bright idea, whether it's a Facebook, an Instagram, Twitter, we're going to have the ability to invest in our own future. No different than Peter Thiel did with Facebook. I think he invested $500,000.
Yeah.
You know, in the grand scheme of things, you know, it sounds like a lot, but it's not a lot. Invested $500,000 as their seed money. Look what that turned into. Look at what the investment he got on it.
The investment, the return of the investment, or the story around it. I don't know the name just escaped me. The gentleman invested $5,000 in Uber. It was worth $24 million in 9 years, right? So you talk about that legacy piece. You know, we forget these brands that we see every day. Anheuser-Busch was a real family, is a real family.
Yes.
right? You look at all of these big companies we see out there that are legacies that are out here, John Deere and all of these. Somebody was a visionary in that family, Mr. John Deere, Heinz, and all these people. And now 100 years later, they're still moving. So let's talk about, what was your first entrepreneurial venture?
I don't even think you know this.
I
mean, outside of cutting grass, I had my first lawn care company when I was 12 years old. But fast forward, my senior year, I started a restaurant in high school.
Really?
The name of my restaurant, I was selling hot wings. I laugh at this name. It was called Wing-alicious Hot Wings.
That was hard to put on a shirt.
Oh, man, yeah. But that was my first business venture. I told my dad, he said, okay, go for it. And so my day was go to school, get out of school at 11 o'clock, because I was doing pretty good academically. Get out of school at 11 o'clock, go over and open up the restaurant, work until about 3 o'clock. I had an employee. 3 o'clock, I'm headed back to the school for my track practice.
Wow.
Do my track practice, rush back to the restaurant and close out 8, 9 o'clock. So at 18 years old, that's what I was doing. That was my first business venture.
Wow, wow. That's just to think about that day as an 18-year-old, 11, and to be that regimented. We can't get these kids in high school now to, anyway, we won't be the old curmudgeons right now, talk about that.
Right.
So what made you go into, when we met, you had the international steel business. I remember you used to come to the AIM Steel office, and you were doing very well. You were overseas. Tell us about when you first got into that business, how you got into doing international business like that.
So in our family, my father already had a demolition and an asbestos abatement company and a general contracting company. So my thought process was, okay, I can easily come out and work for my father, or can I create something for myself, add to the family legacy? And so that was the idea. And so I thought about, I know the construction industry. What do I want to do in the construction industry? They don't have enough blacks in it. I don't have really many blacks at all. So structural steel fabrication. So immediately I created a steel erection company first. Young, naive, 24 years old, wasn't listening to the advice like I should have listened to the advice. That particular company failed miserably, but it's okay. But I started the next company doing the exact same thing, but I added the fabrication component to it. 2008 market crash. And I'm like, wait a second, I can't catch a break here. Company's doing well. At that point, I grew the company up to maybe about 2 million, still doing modest work. Shut it down. I said, you know what, I'm gonna try this one more time. And my wife was like, don't give up, yeah, you're good at it, just bad luck. Third time, home run. Before we know it, we're operating in 18 different countries. We were doing the American Embassy, fabricating steel, the American Embassy of London, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Frankfurt, Germany. Grew the company up to 70 million. So had I quit, I wouldn't be with the company with 70 million. And I love it. I took it a step further to where I went down to Tecate, Mexico, found a steel company that was about to go out of business, negotiated that, took over that particular company. That company already had 140 employees. And so I walked into a situation to where I acquired a company that has 140 employees, all of the plant equipment in there, 80,000 square foot plant. And it just kept driving. Then I took it a step further. I called the U.S. Department of Commerce. I said, look, you guys need help fabricating steel in the Middle East and in Africa. I want to go over to the Middle East. What are some companies that are great companies? I said, I have a list. I'm going to show you my list. Let me know what you think about that list. And on that list was a company called Root Steel. Root Steel was owned by Arabian Roots. Arabian Roots did about 1 billion, but Arabian Roots were owned by the Saud bin Laden family. And this was all blessed by the U.S. government. And we all know that the Saud bin Laden family does, close to 100 million. I did close to 100 million. And things were just taken off from that.
So you're telling us the story about all the success you had overseas, and you got the big contracts over in the Middle East and in Africa and everything. You got over that hump. You got over that hurdle, right? Which gave you the ability to have the financing and the resources and the government contracting, because the bonding and things of that nature have always been a challenge for businesses. That seems like that's one of the biggest problems for Black businesses in the construction space.
Bonding is a huge issue outside of just having the additional capital that's needed. So the way that bonding works, people don't realize that there's only a handful of companies in the entire United States that reassures insurance companies for bonding. And so we had a $20 million bonding limit. Got a call one day from our bonding company and said, hey, we have this new policy. We need your spouse to sign on the dotted line too. My first thought was, well, first of all, my wife has her own money. Why do I want to put that in jeopardy? And she has nothing to do with my company as an executive or anything. It didn't make sense. So I told him no. I said, okay, well, we're going to have to decrease your bonding from 20 million down to $1 million. What that meant was I can no longer do capacity. If my client required me to do bonding up to 20 million, I could only do $1 million, and that's the end of it. And so I started to shop around. Every bonding company I went to, this was their new policy, which means they got together and decided that, no, we want your spouse to sign on it also. And it's just one of those things that you grow and you have barriers to be put in front of you over and over again. You wonder why African-American companies, it's so difficult for them to reach that 100 million, that 200 million.
But once again, we look at these barriers that get put in place. You know, you talk about the bonding, going from $20 million down to $1 million, that obviously puts you in a big, tough situation. How did you pivot from that? And then we're going to talk about what happened with the first Trump administration.
So we just continued to push forward, you know. We had to do smaller volume, and we just got more strategic with it, but our overall revenue started to drop, you know. But it's a situation that I always feel that African Americans face, that so many barriers get put in front of us that prevent us from growing the company to 100 million, 200 million, 500 million, and getting to that $1 billion mark, you know? And it's all related to barriers, and it's difficult to get around them sometimes.
Put the place up.
Let me show you how you can quickly add some boom to your Zoom meetings with Ecamm Live. First, you can connect your pro camera and then bring that into Zoom via Ecamm Live's virtual camera feature. So you can add your logo to the corner, and you can even add a QR code or swap it out with your social media handle. In fact, you can drag and drop any image or video, even GIFs, and you can add a PDF, PowerPoint, or Keynote presentation here. So you don't need a videographer, a producer, or an editor to level up your Zoom meetings. You just need Ecamm Live.
You know, I see people make these big moves, these big ventures, and the Magic Johnsons of the world, or you know, some of the bigger guys who do these. And there's always partnerships that you have to get to a certain level. You can't do this stuff by yourself for some obvious reasons. First Trump administration, huge tariffs that were put on Chinese. People think this is new. What he's doing now is not new. He did this years ago. Tell us about your experience with that.
It's a whole replay of that. So that year was the year that we was going to reach 70 million. It was February. We had about $18 million worth of backlog, worth of work. And backlog means that we already have $18 million worth of contracts already secured as early as February. So, and in the steel market, profit is only about 10% overall. So Trump rolls out the tariffs, which is 36%. But most people don't realize that the tariffs had nothing to do with the increase with the steel. He eliminated their competition. And so now you're left with a handful of steel companies in all of the United States who has no competition. They increased their price on US citizens by 36%. So within 2 weeks, we had a deficit of 36% on $18 million. And so we're trying to figure our way through this. Then he canceled a NAFTA agreement. It took us 2 years to become certified with NAFTA as a maquiladora. 2 years to do that. And so at that particular point, we had to make a decision that we got to figure out how to decommission this particular plant, because 100% of my revenue—
Which is the one was in Mexico.
Which was in Mexico, which the office here with 140 employees in Mexico, 40 employees here in Atlanta. The Atlanta office were all of the executives to where we supported the operation down there to Tecate, Mexico. So now all of a sudden we got to figure something out, you know? We got to quickly pivot, because there's no way that you can sustain 100% of our revenues was with the federal government. And we're doing American embassies again, like London, Tajikistan, Pakistan, Frankfurt, Germany, Swaziland, Djibouti, even China. All of that was gone just with a blink of an eye. And so I came up with the idea was, I had sold a building once. I purchased this building for $300,000. I put about $150,000 into it. And then I got an offer of 1.5 million. And then I was like, wait a second, that was pretty easy, you know? Maybe I can do something in the real estate industry.
Right.
And so I started doing my research. I shifted my entire company over into real estate development.
Yeah.
And I haven't looked back since.
Haven't looked back since. We're sitting right now in Ali Events in Lakewood. This building is not only this event center that we're in, but you have other business partners that are here in different spaces here. And primarily Black businesses, right?
It is. So this building, one of our smaller buildings, it is 30,000 square foot, but it's filled with all Black tenants. And real estate is such a phenomenal thing to develop wealth, in my opinion. So within 5 years, we were able to accumulate almost close to $30 million worth of real estate in just a short time period. And although this building has 100% Black tenants in it, I don't like to do all of my developments that way because it doesn't lead to success. It's going to always be maybe 70-30 or 60-40 because the idea is that I want the building to thrive to where everyone comes to the building to spend money in a Black community and to spend money with the majority of the Black tenants there, you know? You know, because even when you look at some of the establishments that, you know, like the Black Wall Street over in Lithonia, great concept. But less than 1% of the people that frequent there are white. And most people, we get this argument all the time. We want our establishment to have Black patrons, white patrons, everyone that you can think of, because ultimately the majority of that is coming back to African-American owned companies, even at 60% and 40% being others. But in order to bring more people in, you have to have a little more diversity.
So yeah, white companies, they don't just depend on white folks to support their businesses. And I think that's a challenge that we have a lot of times as Black businesses. We love to be prideful. You know, Black business this, put Black in your name, but then sometimes it hurts your potential customer base.
It works for certain things. You know, I did the post with Target that went viral, that got a lot of backlash, and people don't want to hear the truth because it was just too emotional for them. Some products it work well with, you know, hairline, healthcare and stuff like that, because we're different, you know, our body is different, our hair texture is different. I get that. But some things it doesn't work. You know, if you have a wine that's catered toward Black people, and if you have seasoning products that is marketed solely for African American, I can go on and on and on. No, we want to cross every boundary that we can think of. It's no different than Suave have a hair care line for Black people and for white people. So my thought process is, if you're going to do something, try to do it for both, because you want those dollars to come in. But more importantly, what we are failing at is essential products. And what I mean by essential products, we always want something that's fancy and designer and to be known. But a lot of the products that are not known are the most successful ones. Why can't we make T-shirts, underwear, socks, owned by a Black company, but universal?
And not branded.
Yes.
Just plain white T-shirts, plain underwear, and let somebody else come nuts and buy that.
That is 100% correct. Paper, pencils. Why can't we have a Black company that's into making dog food, laundry detergent, essential products? So many things that we can be doing to where if we got into that industry within 10 years, we will have more companies that's on the verge of being $1 billion company. And so that's where my focus is going to be at.
So we do it, like we do have a few laundry detergents in different companies, and you can market that same product if it's not so apparent by the branding and the packaging. You can take that same product and market it and put a little white baby there and do it in that market, and Hispanic baby, and you know what we call ambiguously ethnic. You know, you see that person, could be biracial, could be Hispanic, could be Middle Eastern, whatever. But I think that pride part of it, it's important in the Black community. It's very important. But we have to make sure we get to a point, like you said, where we got to understand that there's a broadness that needs to be established.
And people feel that they're selling out by doing that, and that's just far from the truth. The ultimate goal is bringing economics back into our community. And it doesn't matter if your product is sold to everyone. It don't have to be 100% sold to African Americans. And to give you the numbers, so the data says that 38% of African Americans or Blacks support other Blacks. So if you have a product, your pool now is 38%, but now you got to break it up by gender. Do your product, is it something for a woman or a man?
Yeah.
Is it something for elder or child care?
That's right.
So it goes down even further, and before
Yeah.
you know it, it dwindles down to 2%. So
Right.
your product now, based because you want to make it solely African American owned, Black owned,
Right.
you're capturing 2% of the market.
Yeah.
Only 2%. We go to
Yeah.
Target. We all know what the black aisle is, and you can count how many times do you see a white person down that particular aisle.
Right.
And not to say that we don't want those products, we do, but as a whole community, brother, we got to diversify.
Yeah, you're right.
Mhm.
You know, great point. Carol's daughter is a great example. They just recently was repurchased by the young lady who originally started it. But her brand was never felt exclusively Black.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they had the greatest success, right? And you know, we all knew in the Black community who she was.
Yes.
But instead of putting her next to Suave, instead of her putting us all in the Indie aisle, on the Black history aisle, probably help her be more successful.
I would agree.
Yeah, the Target situation is interesting. We're pretty bougie about the stores that you know, some of us middle class folk I ain't going to Walmart, I'm going to Target. You know, that used to be the joke, right? Now, and Target did a lot of great business for Black folks. Tabitha Brown, who's, you know, famous for all the products that she did independently, and now she's got a whole product line in Target.
Yeah.
And she was kind of like, hey guys, don't stop shopping at Target. And now people want to jump on her back.
Tabitha Brown said that?
Yeah.
Okay.
But the thing here's the thing, she's got a vested interest in us still going to Target.
Yeah.
She's got pots and pans and all types of stuff in there, right? So we got to find a balance. Now,
Yeah.
no one's saying that the boycott was not necessary, and it's not necessary, that it is not necessary because it's moving the needle,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to make them respond. So we'll see how that turns out. You have a very intentional way that you move. Your service is based in business, right? There's a lot of things you could just sit back and not be as engaged as you are. You tell people all the time, you vote Democrat and Republican. You touch whatever base is going to help us move the needle, but you continue to be intentionally focused on Black liberation through economics. Talk to us about that.
Everything I do is with the intent of moving the needle for African Americans, and a lot of people don't understand that. So when you sit back and you analyze how other cultures get ahead, it is the few that's leading the many, and most people don't understand it, or most people don't get this. So let's Project 2025. You have a group of who decided what is best for who.
For everybody.
There you go. So let's look at the Asian community. You had a small group of people who said that, hey, affirmative action doesn't work. We think this is best to get rid of affirmative action so that Asians can benefit more when it comes to universities, whether it's worth or not. But that is my thought process also. We as people are so emotional to where it's hard to get everyone to coalesce around the idea.
Right.
You got to just have to have faith and understand that what you're doing is going to benefit the African American community. So I take that approach even when it comes to politics. I sit in the middle. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. It's whomever can deliver what is needed for our community. Let's take Georgia. We're here in Georgia. Georgia has approximately 538 cities. Out of that 538 cities, 121 of them are historical Black. And what I mean by that, the voting population is 51% or more Black, but the overall historic population is usually 70% or more Black, and then is run by Democrats. So once I did that data, I was like, wait a second, I've been yelling at Republicans and saying Republicans need to do this more, but those particular cities that I just mentioned, the 121 of them, they only do 2% with African Americans also. But yet we was upset, boycotting, saying that, hey, Republicans, you guys are only doing 2% with African Americans also, but it's the same issue. So because of that, I moved my whole philosophy to the middle.
Sure.
And so, you know, we have supported great Republicans. I'm good friends with Governor Kemp, and yes, we did support Governor Kemp. And he made a promise, and he delivered on that promise. Although it needs to be improved, Georgia now has the first minority bill ever. A lot of people don't understand that the first minority bill ever passed in the state of Georgia was done by Governor Kemp, our small business plan. So Georgia has only had 3 or 4 Republican governors ever. So who was the other governors? There was Democrat. And so that goes more to what I was speaking about. We have to stay in the middle with our philosophy. There's great Democrats. They're horrible Democrats. There's some Democrats that I can take you to that I know who they are, and they're part of the Klan. And there's great Republicans and there's horrible Republicans also. Sit in the middle.
Yeah, but you mentioned Governor Kemp, but you also have great relationships with an Andre Dickens, who's
Yes,
the
absolutely.
current mayor of Atlanta, and so that helps to move that needle.
Yeah.
Someone has to be there to negotiate, to be in between the two.
So a great relationship with the Kamala Harris administration, who they came down to have a conversation with us. We supported
Absolutely.
VP Harris with this, and of course she understood it. But unfortunately, we're in this particular situation. But it goes to my thought process, and there's a lot of blacks who think the same way. Let's sit in the middle and just let's take this political mess and put it to the side. I know how I can hit the point. This is probably going to get me in a lot of trouble for saying this, but it's the truth of the matter. So we got invited to DC. At that particular time, my father spoke with Loretta Lynch under the Obama administration. And if Obama could have ran for a third term, we probably would have voted for him a third term. But we told her that a lot of municipalities, a lot of departments are not following the federal regulations. The federal regulations say that you should aid, assist, and do whatever you can when it comes to social and economically disadvantaged. And then the Constitution says that also they are breaking the law. And because they are breaking the law, you can withhold their federal funds to force them to comply. We was told by that particular time by Democrats that we can't do that. That's not the right thing to do. Fast forward now, look what Trump is doing. The exact same thing that we tried to tell the Republicans to do. He's issuing these executive orders and telling universities, telling different departments, you won't get a dime, and making good on his threats.
Right. That's right.
And guess what they do? Comply.
Yeah.
We could have did the same thing. Every state in the United States would have had to comply with the social and economically disadvantaged program. Every state would have had to comply.
Yeah, I don't think people understand what's going on right now. People say this, it's illegal, it's illegal, it's illegal. He's going the route of the administrative route. If the Congress says that this money is allocated, but then he tells the people who are supposed to cut the checks, don't cut the checks.
And it's not illegal because he can do that because to some extent he can say that they're breaking the law, just like we tried to tell the Democrats that they're breaking the law. Well, the only reason that he can do that is because they started to change the law as it relates to minorities and social and economic disadvantage. So now, because they've started to change the law, it's a thin line to where are they doing something illegal? And so we missed that opportunity because had the social and economically disadvantaged policy, the federal regulation for the far reds had not been changed, every state would have had to comply. Department of Transportation would have to comply. Department of Energy would have to comply. Police departments would have had to comply because they get federal dollars also. All of their money would have been held up and they would have complied.
Yeah, we're getting a lot of civics lessons right now. The stuff that's happening in the beginning of this administration. Now we're 70-some days into it. I know when everyone's viewing this, who knows when they're seeing it, but we get the civics lesson. There's a lot of stuff people to challenge. I saw a young lady, a Harvard law graduate, was saying the third term of Trump is not. There's ways to make it happen,
and that's scary.
It's very scary.
Yeah.
It's very scary. There's a route that he could run as VP, and on day one, whoever's running for president could resign, and he could be president again.
I didn't think about it that way. I know they're trying to use other methods to do it, but that is one particular way that possibly can be done.
It's insane. So. But we got to keep moving. So what would be your advice? You're living it, you're in business, you're dealing with folks on both sides of the aisle. You're dealing in business, you're dealing in civics areas. What would be your advice for us to keep moving and remain successful?
I think that the only way that we're going to come out of this is by focusing solely on economics. We need to start educating our kids and teaching our kids that education is great, but education doesn't mean anything if we still have to be beholden to others.
Yeah.
So get a good education, but come out, figure out how to start your own business. There's 43 million blacks in the United States. Imagine not focusing solely on getting them to get a good education and come out and get a job, but we tell them, get a good education, figure out how to start your business. And if we got 10% of our people to start their own business, that's 4.3 million. The average small business creates about 3 jobs. So that is 12.9 million people that we just employed of our own. And no matter how you look at it, blacks usually hire blacks, Asians usually hire Asians, whites usually hire whites.
Absolutely.
And so we have to focus on starting our own business. That is the only path that I see that we're going to come out of this economic issue that we have, because economics solves so many other issues. It solves education issues to a certain degree. It solves police brutality issues. We've been fighting the same fight since Rodney King, and look where we're at, you know?
Even before that.
Yeah, right. So we have to focus solely on economics, in my opinion. And I want to bring a point home, and hopefully people can kind of understand this. Imagine that we're at war, and we're trying to fight multiple countries. There's no way that we can win that by fighting multiple countries, because we don't have the resource to do it. That's what we're doing. We're trying to fight the war on poverty, the war on education, the war on jobs as African-American people. So many different issues. We're never going to win that war because we're fighting multiple countries. And when we do fight multiple countries, there's a world war where countries come to your allies. We don't have any allies. And when you look at when we had the war against Afghanistan, Baghdad, one country, we wanted to focus on that win. We have to take that same analogy. Let's find one problem, focus on that problem. We have the resources, and after we are successful with that, then let's go to the next problem.
We got to own some more dirt.
Yes.
We got to be able to build more community.
Absolutely.
You know, having the ability to build community is paramount for sure. Man, great conversation. And we got a little announcement, because we're going to continue these conversations. And so you and I are going to do a podcast together.
And you know how I feel about podcasts, but you brought me around, and I do agree that it's time for us to start doing it the right way.
Yeah, you know, you have too much information, your heart is in the right place, and the bottom line is there's a lot of people who got podcasts who ain't got nothing to say, and they're making a whole bunch of money and noise doing it.
You know, it's hard for me to even cut on the internet sometimes, social media, to hear somebody talking about real estate but don't own any real estate, don't have a pot to piss in, or they've bought a building, they're just sitting on that building, they think they're gurus at it, but they've never made that building to come to life, you know? From even business advice, you know, it's time that brothers like you and I who've actually done the work, have a success track record, get into the game to start educating our people and teaching people how to truly scale their business.
Yeah, we got, you know, you have a great network, I have a great network. We're going to bring some of these people together and explain to people how to make this thing work from an economic standpoint. We got to get it done.
Yes.
Thanks so much, Miguel Lloyd, host of Chamber Live. Great conversation with Omar Ali. You make sure you stay locked in. We'll see you all next month.